Hey, it's Alex from Los Angeles.
And this is Karan from San Francisco. Welcome to Movies That Shaped Us. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but were both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we will cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite films. So, what is the topic of the day, Alex?
So today we're going to discuss the movies that shaped our sense of adventure. So we're going on a big
Ooh.
adventurous journey today. Why don't we start just talking a little bit about like what does sense of adventure mean to us? So Karan, like what is sense of adventure to you, and how did you approach this episode?
Good question. Yeah, I think the way I approached my list was what are the things that I associate with the spirit of adventure? There's a little bit of magic, there's a little bit of discomfort, there's a little bit of fun, and a whole lot more. So, very excited to get into the list. What about you, Alex? How did you think about this?
Yeah, very similar adjectives I would use for what I think is adventurous. I thought a lot about what in times in my life I felt adventurous, times maybe I wanted to be more adventurous, and maybe these movies would have been,
Mhm.
inspiring to me to kind of get out there a little bit. And I think, adventure as a genre, there's a lot of those films, but I was trying to think not just to be very only focused on movies that might be classified as a typical adventure movies, but thinking more about it from a again, looking at my own life and how I can try to stretch myself a little bit as well. Not that there's not a sense of adventure in all my films, but I
Right.
was trying not to. It was easy to get kind of trapped up as, oh, here's all my favorite adventure films. Like, no, 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 this is not that.
I was going to ask you that would you consider yourself as an adventure person in sort of the classic definition of
That's a great,
it?
yeah, that's a great question. I would say more over time as I've gone
Uh-huh.
older. I feel like I've been trying to be more adventurous and stretching myself, and going outside of expectations, trying a lot of different things. I think, as I was younger, I just maybe was a lot more like, oh, this is what I like, and I'm kind of stick to that. So I think I could definitely be more adventurous, and I try to a lot as I get older. But yeah, I think these films that I chose at least are inspirations for me even to this day of trying to remember to have
Mhm.
that spirit of adventure because it makes life exciting. That's what I
Yeah,
think. What about you?
I totally agree.
Would you consider yourself adventurous?
I would say so. I mean, it also sort of to me is a mirror of the phase of your life you're in. There've been phases of my life where I've been very much about, oh, I'll try anything once. I mean, I
Right.
shouldn't say anything, but most things. But then there are others where I just haven't been that way. So I think it sort of depends. But in general, I think I grew up with a mindset of stretching myself a little bit,
Hmm.
trying new things. So that's always been a part of my spirit, I would say. But I wouldn't classify myself as like a, quote unquote adventure person who's like leaping out off,
Right. Right.
cliffs or whatever. Like, no,
Yeah,
that's
me
not
neither.
gonna happen. No. Although I have gone skydiving.
You
So
have.
I have.
Whoa,
So
you have me beat there. I didn't know that. Whoa. You should call yourself adventurous then. That's pretty
I guess
crazy.
so. I'm never doing it again, but it was a
You
lot of
did it
fun.
though. Like that's huge. That's awesome. I want to hear more about that later, actually.
That's good.
Great. So why don't we get into the adventure of this episode? And do you want to start us
Oh,
off with your number three film that shaped your sense of adventure?
sounds good. So my number three is a little movie called The Mummy from 1999, directed by Stephen Sommers, starring our very own Brendan Fraser, who's having a comeback of sorts.
He's got a big
Rachel
moment.
Weisz,
Yeah.
yeah. Quick log line at an archaeological dig in the ancient city of Hamunapatra. An American serving in the French Foreign Legion accidentally awakens a mummy who begins to wreak havoc as he searches for the reincarnation of his long lost love. So I put this movie on my list because this movie to me is a little bit of what I just hinted at the beginning, captures the mystery and the magic of adventure.
Hmm.
And I don't know, this is sort of how I grew up, I suppose, where Egypt, and even till this day, is very mysterious and magical to me. There's something
Hmm.
about the place, and as an adult I've actually been to Egypt and I've visited the pyramids, and
Oh,
it
whoa.
totally lived up
Oh,
to
cool.
my
Yeah, I've never been.
expectation.
I've always wanted to
Yeah,
go. So
It was
that's good that
amazing.
there's still mystery there and adventure, even though you've been. That's saying a lot about Egypt.
Yeah,
That's cool.
I think so. Because it's
Nice.
just their practices and how advanced they were, but also how brutal and, all the complications that come with it. But there's something very magical about that. And so I think this movie captures that. It also came at a point in my life and our lives when, we were what, teenagers. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this is a bit of a time capsule movie for me in that sense, especially
Mm-hmm.
since I had not seen the Indiana Jones movies until
Oh,
much later in life.
interesting.
This movie,
Oh,
often called, the poor man's Indiana Jones,
right,
is
right.
all I had.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh,
I ate it up as a kid.
yeah.
What about you? Had you watched this growing up?
Yeah, I did see it when it came out, and you know, we talk a lot about like movies at that time, and I was a
Right.
teenager, and I think if this movie had come out maybe 2 years earlier, I would have like been all into it, but I was in this phase where I was looking down upon this type of movie and thought I was too good for it. And like,
Oh,
this is dumb. Like, I like, all these more, adult kind of movies. And I remember thinking it was dumb. Like, I saw it. I was like, why is this so popular? This is stupid. I'm not really into that. And then I watched it again in college, I think. And I understood at least the second time I saw it of like why it was successful because it's a huge hit.
huge
Um,
hit.
and I hadn't seen it since then. And I, watched it for this podcast, and I totally got it. And I'm just, maybe I have more sense of adventure now to think outside of my own box of, the type of, films that I might be liking now than at the time. But I really enjoyed it, seeing it again. Like it was super fun. It was actually totally funny. I was going on a walk with my dog like the day after I saw this movie, and there was this guy and his girlfriend or wife or whatever walking their dog, and he
Mm.
had the sweatshirt on. There was a picture of Brendan Fraser and Vice from this film, and
Wow.
on it said, "The Mummy is the perfect movie." Just so
By the
random and
way,
weird, but
only in LA. This would not happen anywhere else in the entire
maybe,
world.
yeah. But
Probably not.
I was like, oh, if I'd seen that shirt when I saw this film first, I would have been like, this guy sucks. But now I'm like, okay, I get it. Yeah, no, I thought it was really
That's
fun. It was a
hilarious.
really, really fun film, and I think because I had seen Indiana Jones and grew up on those films, maybe at the time I was thought it was too
Yeah.
like a poor man's version, and now I can
Yeah.
kind of look beyond that and see the magic and the fun that this film has, which it's great. I really enjoyed the rewatch.
Yeah, it is really fun. It sort of has a little bit of a video game kind of thing to it, right? Like you never know what's going to come at you, the little beetles or the
Yeah,
crickets or this or that or
yeah.
that. So I think it keeps you guessing, it keeps you on your toes. But also, I think it sort of explores the reason behind why people get into adventure and such. And I
Mm-hmm.
think even though it's done in a very archetypical sort of way, but you're in it for the adventure or the passion or the greed or just the obsessive nature of it. And as I watched it over time, I think that really stands out. Like every
Mm-hmm.
person represents something. I also think to me, this is personal from the point of view of just taking trips with people that you don't know very well. Like at business
Mm-hmm.
school, we had a bunch of these trips, and I think this movie has a great, though archetypical way of representing this random collection of people who've just come together. There's the one who's very well prepared, the other one
Yeah.
who's troubled, the other one who's going to get you out of trouble, the other one who's just lazy and annoying. And so you have the entire cast of characters. So it's kind of a fun ride in that sense too. Something I associate a lot with adventure is, who are you with,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other part, of course, is where are you? And like we said earlier, like it's something very magical and mysterious about Egypt. And I don't know, watching this movie this time, the thing that stood out to me the most is actually Rachel Weisz. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, she just looks so beautiful and
Yeah.
so amazing. But I mean, she is obviously cut above as an actor as opposed to anybody else in the movie. And maybe this
Fraser
is
did a good job, but I'll see your
sure.
point. Yeah, he did a good
Yeah,
job.
yeah. I'm okay on him in
Okay, okay,
general.
okay, okay.
But yeah, but this one with Rachel Weisz, I don't know. There's something, or maybe I just personally relate to that approach of adventure, which is from a place of passion and wanting to really learn about the history and really
Mm-hmm.
want
Mm.
having a little bit of, I don't know, curiosity, but also from a place of respect. And because for me, when I'm traveling, it's very important to engage with the local people as much as I can, and
Right.
understand how people live and what do they believe in, what makes them laugh or cry. And I feel like she has that kind of wide-eyed wonder
Hmm.
on her face. So I don't know. I really connected with that. That said, though, the movie is also quite silly. Like, the effects don't hold up anymore. It's too video gamey, to my earlier point. It's too plot twisty. At some point, you sort of lose interest, and so this is not a masterpiece. This is not Indiana Jones as established before, but it's a good fun time. I think this is a good blockbuster fun movie that has a little bit on its mind as opposed to not.
I agree. Yeah, again, I really enjoyed this rewatch coming at it from a fresher perspective than like my sort of closed-minded, annoying teenage self. And yeah, I thought the thing that actually surprised me the most was just how good like the script was, and like the witty dialogue really
Yeah,
worked. And maybe
great
this is
dialogue.
also Fraser and White's just selling it. But some of these movies, like the snappy dialogue just comes across as overly written and dumb and like
Right.
kind of cringy. I was like laughing at a lot of it. I was like, oh, this is like a
Yeah.
sense of fun in their dialogue that I thought was just really well written. Like Stephen Sommers, I guess, did a really good job capturing this type of adventure film. And I also enjoyed like the iconography, especially at the end when it kind of turned into like a Roy Harryhausen, like Jason the
Hmm.
Argonauts when he's fighting all those skeletons. Yeah, they're CG instead of stop motion, but it's a good kind of like homage to that. When she's kind of like strapped there to the slab at the end, and Brendan Fraser's like fighting off all the skeleton creatures. I just thought, I was like, oh, this is really fun, and he's
It's
capturing
really
that.
fun.
That sense of fun from adventure movies of old, and it's a good homage, but still fun in the to up leveled in terms of effects to 99. So yeah, I like The Mummy. I mean, I'm not gonna buy maybe that guy's sweatshirt, say The Mummy's a perfect movie, but at least I'm not gonna like, frown at him if I see him again in the neighborhood. It was just so
Oh,
random.
admit
I
it.
literally was almost gonna tell him, like, I literally just watched this movie like a day before.
Should have.
This is so weird. And I could have plugged the podcast again, so that's shame on me.
You totally should have. Exactly.
That
It's
was
like,
bad.
guess what?
Yeah, guess what? You in a couple weeks, like you can listen to this episode here of a podcast. So that's bad. That's bad on me.
Should have done that.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to add here, which I have brought this up many, many times on the podcast, which is that they are in actual locations, and that matters.
Yes. Yes.
Even though there is CGI of all the
Hmm.
skeletons and what have you, but the sense of place is pretty real, and you
Totally.
feel that. And after the movie was over, I was watching where all they shot, and they are in the Middle East and all sorts of places, and you do, I think, a transportive quality to an adventure film, I think, is very, very important, because the
Totally.
place is such an important critical part of why you are doing this in the first place. So
Hmm.
kudos to them for doing that. If this movie were made today, it would be probably on some green screen
Right.
soundstage,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't look as good.
Totally.
Please see the Poirot movies by Kenneth Branagh.
Oh, I have not yet, but from the trailers, I can guess exactly what you're saying. It all looks
Horrible.
like it's shot on a soundstage in Atlanta, because it probably
Yep.
was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. The Mummy. That's my number three. What's your
Nice.
number three?
My number three is a film from 1947, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. So this is directed by Norman Z. McLeod, starring Danny Kaye, Virginia Mayo, and Boris Karloff. So the IMDb plot summary is: a clumsy daydreamer gets caught up in a sinister conspiracy. This is a film that I watched a lot as a kid, and it definitely really
Oh,
impacted me in terms of sense of adventure. Had you seen this before or heard of this film before?
I had not. I'd heard of it because Ben Stiller made a remake,
Yes,
which
there
was
was a
much
remake.
maligned, which I did not watch.
Yeah,
So
I
I
haven't
knew
seen
it
it.
was a remake, but
Okay.
I had not watched the movie. But look at us going back to our childhoods for our number threes.
I know, yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally, and the Danny Kaye was also an actor from this time period that I watched a lot of his movies as a kid too. Had you seen him before or know about him? Because a lot of this,
I knew about him. I think I've seen a movie or two of him,
okay,
but don't have any association like you probably did.
yeah,
If I've seen something, it was much later in life.
got it. Okay, yeah, because this movie is really much a showcase for him and his comedic sensibilities and his
Totally.
talents. But to
It
get
comes
into
across.
like why this film did resonate with me. The movie, as it said in the plot summary, it is about, he plays this daydreamer who's always going off on these adventures in his head because his own life is so mundane and boring, and he's a very put upon guy. Like even the opening scene, he's there driving his mom to the store or something in a car, and she's yelling at him like, "Oh, you're driving too fast, like stop this." So you immediately know this is a guy who's like very put upon, doesn't have a lot of agency in his life, but he does in his dreams, and everything can inspire him to go off, and they have these really cool little like dream sequences. And to me, like as someone who, was not a like Brendan Fraser going off on these quests to try to find, ancient relics in the desert, that's adventure for him. Like for me as a kid, like I can only just daydream and think about the adventures I wanted to be on. Much like Walter Mitty was doing in this film. And I always loved those fantasy sequences too. As a kid who did think a lot about things, I mean, as kids do, I guess they do a lot of daydreaming. But I was definitely inspired, and he would see like the first one is he sees a billboard with for some soap or something. There's like ship on it, and then he imagines himself as a captain in this giant storm. But he's always the hero in all of his adventures too,
Right.
which I thought is kind of fun. But then the twist, I guess, in this is he does fall into a real adventure, some cloak and dagger kind of conspiracy with like a murder.
Hitchcockian
Yeah, exactly.
stories.
Very kind of Hitchcockian plot sort of comes in, and he is not like he's afraid, he's scared of it. He all of a sudden, like when his real sense of adventure is put to the test initially, like it's not like he jumps at the bit. It's like, finally, I can do this in real life. He starts freaking out and doesn't want to be involved and is scared of this and scared of this. And I think, over time, actually, though, he does end up getting that real life sense of adventure. So for me, it was not only something I connected to a lot as a kid because of the daydreaming aspect, and I could only kind of picture myself in these scenarios, but I think it's got a good lesson too of, you might think adventure's fun, and when you're on it, it's very different, but still you should power through it because you'll never know kind of where that'll lead your life. And in, this movie, he does have a happy ending. He's now has agency. He's with the woman he's in love with instead of someone who's kind of being forced upon him. So I think it has good messages that I was related to a lot in terms of what adventure could be for me as a kid when I would watch this movie. Did you kind of get that sense too when you were you a daydreamer yourself, or maybe I don't know if all kids do? You still are. Okay, well, maybe that I've left that behind me. So I'm happy to hear that you're still doing it. Yeah, what did you think of that? Those sequences and
To
stuff?
a degree, not the way I was as a kid, but to a degree, I would say. I think a little bit of daydreaming is a good thing in my books. But yeah, those same themes definitely came across, and I love the storyline. I think the messages and the story of the movie is fantastic, and he's very good. I would say though, not to kind of critique the movie, and I'm curious to hear your opinion, that at some point the gags of, oh yeah, he's showing up to office with weird contraptions that his mom asked him to return and what have you, they get a little bit old after a while. And I knew this, even if I didn't know this, it's very obvious from the movie that it's a showcase on his comedic talent. So you sort of get into some pretty elaborately staged things, which the first time around, his sort of 1 hour, it's not an hour, but like 15-minute comedy show special is actually pretty good. But then when it happens a couple of times, like, I was like, oh my gosh, please don't tell me we're doing this all over again now. So there's a little bit of that sort of was happening, but otherwise, like, he's great. Like, if this movie was maybe even done then at that time, but with a more capable director who was not totally given into Danny Kaye's off-screen persona, this movie would actually be in one of the greats, I think, because the story is so incredible. I mean, why couldn't this be It's the Wonderful Life or any of those kind of movies? It could be if handled that way. That's the thing that I kept thinking. That said, I had a ball. I love movies from that time anyway, so it was a good time watching the movie.
I understand your criticism or critique, I guess, of that aspect. There is a lot of kind of vaudevillian parts of the film, which is not something that I typically like, that style. And you can kind of tell it's like, okay, you go off and do your thing for a little bit, Danny Kaye, which happens a lot with like stand-up comedians too when they're in comedies. You sort of can tell, oh, they're just doing their stand-up bit for this scene instead of something organic in the film. But it's funny, like when I rewatch it, because I hadn't seen this movie actually since I was a kid, and I watched it a lot as a kid, and it stayed with me, so that's why I had to include it in this episode. But I found myself like remembering most those bits, like the Danny, especially that whole bit he had about the orchestra I love that scene.
Right.
I'm like, oh, I remember like every line of this, and I thought it was so funny. And those are the things I loved as a kid, like rewatching those particular points. And the more messages of the movie to me were more subtle. Now it's kind of flipped, I guess, as I've gotten older, and I can kind of see the seams a little bit more of. Oh, here they just basically wound him up and said, okay, you do your stand-up bit for 15 minutes.
That's what was landing on me.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you can still
totally
do that, but this is where if a director is very capable,
right?
You shoot that very interestingly every time, and
right,
not just like plop the camera on him and it's like, okay, yeah, we'll be here, you do your thing. That's
exactly
sort of how it feels like.
Yeah, it does. Yeah,
but it's still a very good time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I've not seen the Ben Stiller movie. Maybe he corrects all those things. And maybe you might like it. I got maligned. It looked kind of too serious to me when I saw the trailer, so I never ended up seeing it. But I don't know. Now I feel like maybe I should. I don't know.
I don't know. Probably not. And this is the other thing, talking of CGI and such, the little bits that Danny Kaye goes on, the stand-up comedy vaudevillian routine aside, but the way the dream sequences are shot and produced,
yeah,
I love those.
Yeah, those are very cool.
There's like a real tactile sense to them, but not sort of overly done. You can sort of feel that there's a kid-like imagination to how those things are put together. Versus, I remember the trailer, at least of the Ben Stiller one, of course, where all those sequences are heavy CGI.
Yes,
there is in the
true.
clouds, and then of course, Kristen Wiig is waiting for him as sort of the straight person love interest. Which. This movie falls in the weird Kristen Wiig filmography where she did a bunch of these like serious dramatic roles, which
didn't work.
That's the other reason why I just cannot watch this movie. I love her, but not in these kind of roles.
Well, that's an interesting point about how they handle the dream sequences in this film too, because there is realism to them, but they also feel like heightened. There's a sense of heightened reality, just like a real daydream would. Like
that's what exactly.
You don't shoot it as a serious. This guy is a captain on a ship in a storm, and something's going to happen. It feels like like a dream,
like
exactly, which I think is what works so well. Because when you are daydreaming about that, wanting to be this grand adventure, even though you're not, you're just some bookish like guy who works at a pulp novel company. It is going to be heightened in your own dream-like state, and maybe that's why. Again, I don't want to malign this Stiller film too much because I haven't seen it. But if if the daydreams were too realistic, it kind of takes away of the point of kind of what's trying to go on there. But I'm glad you checked this out.
Yeah, me too. Actually, yeah, I had forgotten. I mean, I knew about the original, but I hadn't seen it. So yeah, this was very good.
Cool.
Okay.
Let's continue on our adventure to your number 2 movie that shaped your sense of adventure. Where are we heading today after the trip to Egypt?
Oh, what a day! This movie is gonna slap the crap out of you from sweet kid-like vaudevillian recreations of your dreams. My number 2 is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, very different.
By George Miller, starring Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult, and a whole bunch of other people. Quick logline: in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, a woman rebel against a tyrannical ruler in search for her homeland with the aid of a group of female prisoners, a psychotic worshiper, and a drifter named Max. For me, this movie is on the list because to me, this sort of captures the brutality and the thrill of adventure. This is sort of those, I can't get enough of it, but yet I'm very, very uncomfortable, but yet I have to push through and go on. This is sort of what that signifies to me. And I'm curious to hear when you watched it, but when I watched it right when it came out, this movie stands as one of the singular movie experiences for me in recent times. I just remember my heart racing from the moment you sit down, and when the movie ends, I just remember feeling that there's like sand all over my face and in my mouth.
Yeah, like dirty.
Just such a visceral movie experience. And because I watched this movie when I don't think I was watching every single podcast or was watching every single video, or podcast didn't even exist at that time. So I kind of went in pretty unaware, and I'd not seen any of the other original Mel Gibson Mad Max movies either. So it was a total slap in the face. But absolutely loved it. How about you? Did you watch it when it came out?
I did, yeah. Like though my mental approach was almost kind of like the opposite of yours. Like I'd
Oh,
seen all the Gibson films, not really that. The second one, the second Mad Max film, I think is great for kind of what it is, but I never really took to those too much. I'd seen this maybe a couple weeks after it came out, so it was already like incredibly hyped up when I went and saw it, and I didn't dislike it. I
mm.
wasn't as bowled over as I think the
Oh
critics
wow.
and the audience were when I saw it. And it's also, I have to it's not my genre. Like I'm not a post-apocalyptic guy. The movie
Same.
is a little like I also felt like you did too about like there was sand in my mouth. Um, because the film was effective, but also because it was it's kind of dirty and gross. And I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know, like that's not necessarily my aesthetic. But I could definitely appreciate how the technical achievements and what this film could do and how transportive it totally was. So I'm not like I think the film is expertly made. It just didn't really land on
Yeah.
me. And even in this rewatch, it was similar. Like I was like, oh, I can appreciate this more than I kind of like it. Um,
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Like I'm not a post-apocalyptic person either, but that's sort of what surprised me that
mm,
in addition to sort of admiring the brilliance and the craftsmanship of the movie, I had a great time as well. I really enjoyed it. Um, and I think a lot of that just has to do, I think, I guess two things. One, the performances pretty much across
yes,
the board.
fantastic.
Everybody's just so committed. Maybe, I mean, Tom Hardy is a question mark to me in this movie.
Oh,
But everybody else, I think, is kind of amazing. I mean, he's good too, as sort of, but for a movie title, Mad Max, he doesn't really have much to do. Like, this is really, I think, more of Furiosa's movie, even though, he's maybe sort of the audience surrogate in some
yes,
ways,
that's why I think
perhaps.
he
Uh,
works in that respect.
exactly. Then I think the world building, right? Like, talk
Hmm.
about creating this whole world, which is tactile and real. And yes, it's grotesque and horrible. You wouldn't want to be there, but you also can't take your eyes away from it,
Right.
And the iconic images that this movie has created, all the way from the guy in the red jumpsuit with the guitar,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the beautiful women prisoners, to Furiosa, her whole thing, the
Hmm.
makeup, the amputated arm, and all of it. Immortan Joe, like his whole headgear and breathing and all of it, like this is already iconic. I feel like this has been around in pop culture for so long, and the movie is
Hmm.
not that old. So,
Right. Right.
you know, kudos to them on all of that. But I also think, to your point, like why this movie actually did work on me, even though I had not revisited it since like a
Oh,
couple
okay.
of weeks ago in prep for
Uh-huh.
this, because I have no desire to go back to this world. Unlike Steven Soderbergh, who watches this movie per his watch list that he publishes like multiple times
Hmm.
a year,
Yeah, he's really
which
into it.
I admire
Yeah.
that. But there is something about what the movie has on its mind, this bigger idea of legacy and power and obsession, and who's just existing versus who's the one, grabbing it and sort of wanting to run away with it. And then this metaphor of life, of this, proverbial green place.
Right.
What is that ultimately, if life is an adventure, as they say? uh the movie sort of is mirroring life in that sense, that we are all chasing or being chased to whatever this, heavenly place might be,
Hmm.
whatever you might believe in. So yeah, the movie does have more to its mind, but I think the brilliance of the movie is that it doesn't really lay that thick, at least when you're watching it. The
Right.
point of the movie is to be jolted when you're watching it, and then all these themes come at you much later, once you've sat with it or really haunted by it, honestly. So that's why I think this movie does work for me. But yeah,
Yeah.
curious to hear more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's interesting when because I don't think gone back to this movie since I saw it the first time too,
Mm.
in the theater. And going at it as with this really like looking at it through this adventure lens, I felt actually the Tom Hardy's, Mad Max, who is, I think,
Mm.
definitely much an audience story because he doesn't really do much. He gets taken along for the ride,
Right.
which sometimes adventures can feel like you're not in control. And that really
True.
is kind of an adventure. You're going along in your life is pushing you in a certain direction. You don't really feel like you have much control of what's going on, just kind of going with it and trying to survive. I mean, that is an adventure, and that is definitely what he's going on in that movie. I mean, only very certain scenes he's like does take control and does something that affects the plot, but really he's just observing what Furiosa's on. Like it's her adventure that she's on to try to get to the green place, to try to rescue, the brides and get them to a safe place. And he's just taking along for a ride, like the audience is this whole film, which is a relentless ride. But you're just right along with there with Furiosa as well, much like Mad Max. So I did feel like that is something that I feel in terms of what I attribute to a sense of adventure is a little bit of that, like, well, I'm just kind of along for the ride now. I don't really know kind of what's going to happen, but I'll go with it, And I think that's what Mad Max was doing in this whole movie, even though most of it he wasn't choosing to go with it. He was chained to the front of the front of a truck, going with it, no choice. But I like to think sometimes an adventure is just kind of you go with it and you don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah, in some ways, what you just said to me. Nicholas Holt's character is probably more emblematic of that.
Yes,
he doesn't know where he's going either.
Right,
but he's really in for the ride. Like, like just ecstatic and excited to be on it. So, yeah, what a world.
Totally.
And
actually, Nicholas Holt's character is that's something interesting you brought up too, in the sense of the last movie that I talked about adventure, sense of adventure, going out and doing things can change you, and he does go through a pretty strong character arc. Like he starts off as a villain basically, and then that adventure that he's on with Furiosa and the brides. I don't remember how they're referred to in the brides, right? Like he changes into a hero towards the end, because of what he experiences, which again shows you that getting out there, being adventurous, going on an adventure can change you in positive ways, just like Walter Mitty was also changed in positive ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, this is probably the first time I may have noticed Nicholas Hoult as like a grown-up. I guess he's in the X-Men movies too, but this is the movie, this is the role that I was like, oh, this is like not what I was expecting, and he's really good in it.
He's great. Yeah,
he's really good. And then George Miller as well. I mean, kind of a singular filmography, right? I just can't help but not think that this is the same person who's made Babe and Happy Feet, and you couldn't make something as far away as possible from those movies in this movie. So pretty incredible. And also making this movie I think he was in his 70s, I think, or
like early 70s, late 60s, and it was a very difficult shoot, and no one expected anything out of this. I mean, the Mad Max franchise had been dead since the 80s. Neither of them were huge blockbusters, really. And Mel Gibson, who was the star of those films, wasn't even in the movie. So I'm sure this was not an easy thing to convince financiers to be like, let's make a Mad Max, but remove the superstar from the film. In a franchise that's basically dead. And then look what happened. It was a giant hit globally, left an impact on the culture, and was, very awarded at the Oscars that year. So again, maybe he went on a little bit. He was adventurous enough to try this, and look what happened.
Exactly. Okay, so from the heat-slapping wasteland, where are you taking us next?
Well, this film kind of goes all over the globe a little bit. It's a more traditional adventure globetrotting film. So this is Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol from 2011. This is directed by Brad Bird, starring Tom Cruise, Jeremy Renner, Paula Patton, Simon Pegg, and Michael Nyqvist. And the plot summary is: the IMF is shut down when it's implicated in the bombing of the Kremlin, causing Ethan Hunt and his new team to go rogue to clear their organization's name. So like I said, kind of at the outset here, like this is a more, traditionally thought of adventure film. I think I definitely wanted to include one of those films on my list. I think this film, though, for specific reasons why I chose this one in particular that I'll kind of get into. But I'm assuming you've seen this movie.
Oh, yeah. I'd seen it before. I think when it came out, made a big impression on me also because it takes place in India, part of it.
Yes, and got Mumbai in there.
And has like this Indian superstar, the same guy who was in Slumdog.
That's right.
Conducting the game show in this too, in this like really weird role. But I just remember laughing at the whole thing. But also kind of feeling, I don't know, when you see a place that you're familiar with sort of shown like that in such a huge movie, you cannot not help but just, feel a little bit of giddiness towards
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course, I love all the Mission Impossible movies. So yeah, I was happy to see this on the list.
Nice, nice. I'm glad you enjoyed the rewatch. Yeah. So for me, I think there's sort of traditional things in this film that I associate with adventure all around the world. Like I said, takes place in Moscow and Hungary and Dubai and like you mentioned, India. And in travel and going around the world is a thing that I associate with being adventurous. There's also actually both of your two films, The Mummy and Mad Max, also had to do with like big desert vistas. And this film also has some of that. And for some
Yep.
reason, I don't really know why I associate sand in the desert with adventure. I don't know.
Same.
It's
Me too.
I
Some
don't
people
really know
might
why.
say the ocean or
The
like
jungle.
tropical rainforest,
Yeah.
jungles. Yeah. No, I don't think of that. I think of the desert.
Yeah, I don't know why, but this
I don't know
scene,
why.
this sequence, there's a sequence in this film that takes place in Dubai, kind of like the highlight of the film. But there's, obviously
Mhm.
there Dubai's in the desert, and there's even a huge sandstorm. So there are all those reasons that I felt this film should be discussed. But really, the reason why this Mission Impossible film in particular, because a lot of the Mission Impossible movies have these same globe trotting all
Right.
over the world. There's a desert scene in the Rogue Nation film, but this one in particular, I think, touches a lot on what I find is unique about this film, but then also how it touches on adventure is there's a theme running through this film of things going wrong and not up to plan. So they have all these plans, and every time they try to execute it, something goes wrong. They have to improvise.
Mm.
And for me, a sense of adventure is being okay with stuff messing up, not going to plan, not freaking out over it. They're just like, okay, well, now we got to do this instead. Even from the opening scene, they're trying to rescue the IMF team, Tom Cruise, from a prison in Moscow, and their plan was just to get Tom Cruise out. But he was like, no, I got to get, some other guy that I met in prison out too. He's changing the plan as he goes. He's improvising, and they all just have to kind of go with him to get both Tom and this other prisoner out. And like I mentioned, things break, like in even the classic, this tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds, like they do in every Mission Impossible film.
Right.
This one, the tape doesn't immediately, and it's sort of breaking.
Right.
And then there's a little joke. They play it for a laugh, but it still is like Pitts gets in with this theme. And then I have to talk about, before I get into Tom Cruise, which is another element of this film I want to mention too, but the big moment is him scaling the Burj, the big tower in Dubai. And that scene, actually, the plan was not for him to go outside of the building and scale it to go up to the other floor. They were just going to hack this computer that was like 20 floors up. And that was the plan. And then they get there and they realize, oh crap, we can't hack it.
Oh, wow.
We have to change the original plan of what this was doing now. Well, we got to go outside. And there's this whole scene where like, well, I don't want, like, no one really wants to do it, but Tom's like, fine, I got to do it. It's for the mission, right?
You mean in real life?
Oh no,
or
I'm sorry.
the
In the
movie?
film, the context of the film.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
like,
The
what?
story. Yeah, no. This was planned out actually before. I think the whole script was built around this concept actually.
Yeah,
but
that makes more sense.
yeah, so the characters have to improvise, right, and do something that is unexpected, and things even go wrong when he's climbing the thing. So, like for me, that does that do you connote like adventure with improvisation and kind of things? Do you kind of get what I'm saying here? Does that resonate with you too?
Totally, 100%. That totally resonates. And yeah, the movie from the get-go is that. And I was wondering about that throughout the movie, that, oh, why did Alex put this one on the list as opposed to any of the other ones? And by the end of it, I was like, oh, I see. It's probably this. So resonates and is brilliantly done in the movie.
Right. No, okay, cool. I'm glad that you picked up on that thing too, because I do think it's unique. I mean, they don't deal with this in the other Mission Impossible
Not
films.
to this degree where
No,
it keeps
exactly.
happening.
Right, keeps
things
happening over
go
and over.
wrong, but not like this.
Totally. So just going back to the Burge sequence, and just the other thing I want to layer in here too is just Tom Cruise's persona. I think at this point, starting really with this film, I think this film was the birth of the new phase of his career,
Exactly.
his version of Tom as a movie star, and he's associated with doing crazy adventurous things. And this movie started that. And actually, I will say, I think, to me at least so far, this is still the most crazy thing he's ever done in a movie. This scaling the Burj and doing that for real. And obviously he was under there were safety precautions there, but still there he is on the side of the tallest building in the world.
Crazy.
So every time I see Tom now in these movies, I do get that vicariously live through his sense of adventure, knowing that he's putting his life on the line essentially to do these crazy things is inspiring to me. Maybe I'm not climbing the side of a building, or maybe not even jumping out of a plane like you have, but I want to introduce a little bit of Tom Cruise adventurousness into my life every so often. So I had to mention some version, a Tom film
Yeah,
in this, because he to me is now the movie star that means adventure, because he's not only acting in adventure movies, he's doing adventures to
totally.
film them.
It's so crazy that he's become this poster child of
Yeah,
venture and what it means to push yourself, and but also push yourself for art, which I know sounds super corny and just kind of highbrow in a weird sort of way, but he is able to sell it. And I know we already talked about
totally.
Top Gun Maverick earlier, but
Hmm.
I feel like this year, or really last year, has sort of become this full circle moment for him where, despite all of his oddities
Yes.
and, couch jumping
Right.
shenanigans or what
Right.
have you, we've sort of all, as a society, embraced him
Hmm.
as this adventure person, and the sincerity and the hard work he puts in, come what
No,
may.
no, you're totally right. That's actually an interesting thing you hit on, that, in the next film I'll talk about. I'll kind of get deeper a little bit in this, but I think you're right. Like, Tom Cruise is doing this not for his own. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. It is
Sure.
professional gain, whatever, but he is doing it for art, or for, I even like to think, like, for me, for the audience. Like,
But for the
he is
audience, yeah, the
adventurous, and
experience.
right. He's not doing it in a selfish way. He's being adventurous for, yeah, for us. And yes, obviously he benefits from it too, but I think that is also a key part of, when you think about what good types of adventures are versus, maybe more negative ones. I think doing adventures for selfless reasons, and for other people is a better version of the trait of being adventurous, instead of just kind of being wild and
Mhm.
crazy and using that as an excuse. So yeah, that's a
Mhm.
really good point. I think Tom kind of does it for good reasons, and corny reasons. Fine, it's for art and it's for the audience. But yeah, I mean, I also just do want to say, like, I think this film is also just fantastic in and of itself. It
Oh
definitely
yeah,
rebirthed the franchise, set a lot of
totally.
the direction of where it's going now, with being more of a team effort. A continuity with the other films was never really done before this one, and now it's all a lot about that. Bringing in McQuarrie, who's a big key creative component behind the scenes, and really
Mhm.
do having a giant set piece stunt, that really the whole film revolves around. And now they're, kind of expect that as an audience member. But this film kind of set the tone for that. And I think, Brad Bird also as a director, just fantastic job with a lot
Yeah.
of the little visual flourishes. We were talking about the India sequence. One of my favorite shots in the film is this tracking shot the camera makes across a party, and
Yeah.
it follows a little jumping fountain as the
Yeah.
water
Yeah. Yeah.
goes. And I'm just like, that's so cool. Like, that's the brain of an animator. And
Yeah.
that's what Brad Bird brings to this too.
It's
So
very
this,
Mr. Incredibles right there.
yeah, it really, and it's a sense of fun that he puts in his direction, that also then ties back to our theme of adventure. Adventure is sort of a fun kind of frivolous thing that you do. So yeah, I think the film just holds up, just in the canon of Mission Impossible and action movies in the last 20 years. Just fantastic movie.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, the whole, even the Kremlin sequence. I mean, sure, the CGIs of that is probably not the
Yeah,
best,
right,
and
right.
the Sandstorm CGI is not the best. But
Hmm.
that aside, and that's the thing I think which is special about this movie and everything that's come since in the series is that, yes, there are set pieces, but they matter, like they
Right.
are woven in the story, that in a way that they elevate the stakes and you are in it. Otherwise, if this were just, a big set piece, stunt to stunt situation,
Mm,
I don't think I would care. I don't think I would be as invested. And I think that's the other thing about this movie and the movies that have come since. And then, like you mentioned, the teamwork and the camaraderie between them,
right.
the push and pull between them. Watching this movie again this time, I was actually pretty impressed by Jeremy Renner. I mean,
Yeah,
he seems like a very nice guy. Has gone through a very tough time lately.
he
So,
has. All the best to him.
that's got to be rough and all. But I've never really been a big fan of his. Partly just, I hate to say, just don't like the face.
Fair enough.
That
Yep. No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
sometimes you just have that with certain people.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's
I know
that
what you
person
mean.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in this movie, watching it again, I was like, he's actually very good.
Hmm.
And keeps matches toe to toe with Tom, and I was very happy to see him in the movie. So good job, Jeremy Renner.
No, that's a good, yeah, good shout out, Jim. We're gonna shout out, and again. We wish him all the best as he's recovering from his injuries.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so moving on from Dubai, India, and Moscow, where are you taking us next? for your
Oh,
final
wow.
film.
Okay, so my number one is also kind of all around the globe. It's a movie called Catch Me If You Can from
Mm.
2002, directed by Steven Spielberg. Might have heard of him. Starring Leo, Tom Hanks, Christopher Walken, Amy Adams, bunch of other people. Quick logline: barely 21 yet, Frank is a skilled forger who has passed as a doctor, lawyer, and pilot. FBI agent Carl becomes obsessed with tracking down the con man who only revels in the pursuit. Okay, so I put this on my list because adventure doesn't always have to be, a sand laden mess with your blood bank tied in front of your car. It just doesn't. You can just be taking a ride across the globe in slick looking uniforms with beautiful people sipping
Yeah.
martinis, and that is also adventure. For me personally, a lot of the adventure trips that I've taken of just like traveling around the world have happened to be solo. And though there is always a sense of loneliness
Hmm.
with those, there's also this interesting sense of excitement when you are totally by yourself in a new place where for that brief period you can be whoever you want to be. You can
Yeah.
partake in whatever adventure you want to partake in, and sort of come back home after that. So I think this movie captures that sense of thrill and adventure,
Mm.
that you can sort of do anything. You're for the most part in total control or whatever you're trying to get away with. I mean, I'm not trying to, hint that I'm some secret con man. No, far from it. So if anybody's getting that idea, that's, I apologies,
Yeah.
but more of just like, if you're for, I don't know, a weekend in New Orleans, you can sort of blend in or whatever.
Hmm.
So I don't know. This movie always has that kind of tongue in cheek kind of adventure spirit to it in a very micro kind of way. There are no
Hmm.
grand things. I mean, I guess there's a grand con that's happening, but every episode of his life is pretty micro in that sense, but it's still very elevated because of his sense of adventure. Of course, this movie is about many, many other things like
Hmm.
fathers and sons and legacy and chasing and never being caught, or the obsession of chasing somebody and this weird bond that you might form with somebody who's chasing you. So the movie is about lots of different things, but to me, ultimately, this movie is super fun.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, of course, Spielberg. But then head to toe, I think it's just a brilliantly crafted movie. But I'll speak more of that. But what about you? Had you seen it before, or yeah?
Yeah, yeah, I'd seen this when it came out in theaters. Like I see all the Spielberg's one of my favorite directors, and anything
Yeah,
he does, I'll check out, good or bad. And this one was in a very a period when he was putting a lot of films out and a lot of good
yeah,
films during this sort of early 2000s period. And I think this one falls really well into that category. Leo's becoming like a super movie star. He's growing. He's trying to stretch himself a little bit in this period too. So it's always interesting to go back and watch films that he was in during this time to see him kind of grow as an actor. He's one of my favorite actors, but I think it's interesting watching him. You can tell him getting better over time. Like he didn't kind of come right
yeah,
out of the gate as a great actor. So it's nice to see him kind of stretching himself. It's not a Spielberg film I watch quite often. Like I think I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times before seeing it for or watching it again for this podcast. And it was interesting. Like I did in my head have memories of it, kind of exactly how you describe it, as like a fun, more light kind of fair. For some reason, this time it struck me as sort of sadder in terms of the
oh
reasons
yeah,
why, he's running away from this pain and using
yeah,
adventure to cover up this awful thing that happened in his life with his parents' divorce. Him feeling like he could never live up to his dad. I don't know. Those themes came across a lot more to me, for some reason when I was watching it this time. That is also another side of being adventurous. It's like, why do you want to go out there and be adventurous? And he had a reason of running away from who he was and
mm-hmm.
not facing up to certain things about himself or things in his own life. Which that's not a good or bad reason to try to be adventurous, but that definitely is a side of it for sure. Like
Yeah,
sometimes you do want to escape from something as opposed to inhabit, kind of for the fun of it, inhabit another personality for a little bit. No, you want to escape from who you actually are. And I think
yeah.
that's what he's doing throughout this entire movie. He's almost sort of like challenging himself to catch himself, like because he's running
Totally.
away from himself the whole time is all that this is. So it
Totally.
did really, yeah, I was more saddened and moved by it in that way than I had remembered it being a little more of a lighter Spielberg. I would put this, no, this is actually a very serious movie dealing with a lot of very serious themes. Around adventure. Like I think the adventure
Yeah,
piece of it, I was really looking at it this time. I was like, oh yeah, his adventure is running away from himself. Did you kind of feel
that's
that
very
too?
well put. Very well put. And yeah, this movie's always kind of hit me in that way. But this year, especially after, watching The Fablemans, I just couldn't
Right,
help think
right.
about Spielberg's own life, right? Like why he made this movie, which is, just so impressive that how this master filmmaker has now contextualized his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm very appreciative of what he created last
Me
year.
too.
So
Yeah.
I think the stakes were elevated even more watching this movie this time around, because in some ways maybe he himself has also been running away from his life or trying to catch himself through movies.
For
He
sure. Yeah.
certainly has used movies to contextualize his own pain and deal with his own traumas. So there's very interesting parallels. So if you think about that, it it moved me even more, not just for Leo's journey, but Spielberg's journey, actually.
That's a really good point. I think this movie pairs very well, not to get too much in the Fablemans. I mean, I also loved
Yeah.
it as well. I had seen it and then watched Catch Me If You Can again. So you're right. Maybe that's why these things
Yeah.
bubble up more in me because I understand Spielberg more as a man.
Yeah.
But this pairs very well with Fablemans. I think
I think so too.
it,
Yeah.
it makes this movie better. It elevates this film
It
actually to
elevates it.
watch Fablemans and understand Spielberg a little bit better, and then you can see how he funnels that into his art.
Yeah,
Um,
I totally agree. The other thing that I kept thinking of and kind of build on what you were saying is that for me, adventure and leaving home is only meaningful if you can come back to home.
right,
But if you have no home to go back to and no reason to go back to, then the whole thing sort of becomes one giant soup in a way that you're
yes,
always running away, you're always on the treadmill, and
right.
there's no separation between what is adventure versus not. So I don't know, watching this movie again this time from that lens of depth made me think of that too, that I like adventure because I know at the end of the day I'm going to come back home to the people I love and sleep in my own bed and what have you. And it's always that feeling when I get back the first night that I sleep in my own bed, there is a sense of calm and
Really good
relief,
point.
but also
Yeah.
appreciation for everything one went on. So
Hmm.
this is why this movie was kind of my number one, because it has those fun aspects and pretending to be whoever you want to be and the magic and the thrill that comes with it. But then also this reckoning that adventure, after all, is about coming home at some point,
Well,
at
yeah,
least for me.
no, I've never thought about that before. You're right. An adventure implies, or now to me, especially now that you say this, adventure implies there is a return, and you do
Yeah.
come back as a changed person. You learn from those experience, whatever, but you do come back to something. And I think that's the struggle of Leo's character in this film. Like he's on an adventure to never go back. And how long can
Yeah.
that go? And this film shows you can't run forever. Like you will
Yeah.
get caught, by the feds, Tom Hanks chasing him, but also like you'll get caught up in just not with yourself of like you have no direction
Exactly.
that can't last forever. At some point, you have to just kind of try to find a home somewhere. Um,
Yeah. And he almost does,
he almost
like
does. Yeah.
the whole sequence with Amy Adams and him watching Amy's parents kind of rocking to the same Judy Garland
Yes.
song in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's a moment where you sort of feel like, oh, he might just give all this up. And maybe he's finding that lost love of his parents and the lost childhood, through this new family. But
Right.
of course, he's not going to do that. The last thing I would say on this is just like Spielberg's mastery, when it comes to, I mean, he's a master of composing shots, but
Yes.
watching this movie, I've seen it many times too, but now, especially again, like every little composition, the period detail, which is not hokey or underlining that, oh, we are in a period. No,
Right.
it's just so naturalistic but yet elevated. The script is so elegant.
Yeah.
The pacing of the movie, the editing of the movie is so great. The cut back and forth between present time and what happened before, like it's just such a neat little jewel box of a movie. And I think that's why a lot of people probably felt this was like a lighter Spielberg fare, because you're not sitting for hours and hours like a Lincoln, which I also
Right.
love,
Yeah.
in like,
Yeah.
heavy dialogue with a lot of space. And so you can almost kind of dismiss this one. But no, actually, as we've established through our chat conversation as well, that there's a lot of depth. It's just deceptively look made, it sort of looks very effortless,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean it doesn't have depth to it and craftsmanship to it.
Definitely. I think that speaks to a lot of him as a filmmaker. Like, I think that is his
Yeah.
skill. Like, he has so much pain that he's carried with him. Now we know from the Fablemans what his life was like. And he tries to wrap things around that of fun, adventure, all the Spielberg touches and things like that. But at the core of most of his films, even the most successful ones, there is that pain and heaviness. And he's
Yeah,
dealing with really major themes, but you can enjoy it on both levels. Like, it's fun, but then when you
exactly.
think about it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's there's really touching on some things. I second everything you mentioned. I just want to call out one other aspect of this film that we haven't talked about yet is John Williams' score. I think is just
Oh, and
fantastic.
same.
One of
Yeah,
his best later collaborations with Spielberg for sure. I mean, that whole opening
totally.
theme, that whole
So
sequence,
good.
like Saul Bass inspired, just with that like kind of jazzy
Yeah,
main theme. This score of this movie is just fantastic. So I wanted to call John out on that too,
I
as a
couldn't agree
key
more.
part of this film.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, and honestly, I'd almost forgotten the score of this movie, and the moment the credit sequence rolled in, I was like,
Yeah,
"Oh gosh, yeah, I remember this, and this is so amazing." And
yeah.
I mean, look, we've already talked about scores and how brilliant John Williams is, but
Hmm.
as you know, and listeners might know, that I'm always drawn to kind of the more ambient, story driven, non sort of, a theme for somebody
Right.
kind of blockbustery film score, which I appreciate. I know you like that more
Yeah,
than
that's
I
my
do,
style. Like, yeah.
but this one kind of really fits in my wheelhouse. So it's just
Hmm.
so fun to see John Williams do something like that, where it's not sort of blockbustery, adventure. The sharks are going to kill us, but yes, it's fun times. It's not that score. This is, it really underscores the story and the characters, and it's sort of there on the side. So I loved it.
Yeah,
Good
no, I
call.
mean, he wanted to be a jazz musician and has a big interest in
Yeah.
that. And it rarely comes across in his movie scores because he fits into the more like his career kind of took off copying more of the classic, or not copying,
Right.
but mimicking more of those classic 30s kind of like corn gold large orchestral scores, which I
Right.
really like. But it's fun to see him dabbling in his true passion, I think, which was jazz music, and it has a lot of the elements in the score. So just I wanted to
Yeah.
call the score out. It's one of my favorites.
So good. All right. What is your number one?
So my number one film that shaped my sense of adventure is Groundhog Day from 1993. And this is a film directed by Harold Ramis, starring Bill Murray and Andy McDowell. And the IMDb plot summary is a narcissistic, self-centered weatherman finds himself in a time loop on Groundhog Day, and the day keeps repeating until he gets it right.
Mhm. Happy Groundhog Day belated, by the way. We just passed
That's
it.
right. We did. Yeah, we just passed it. Actually, I watched the movie on Groundhog Day. It lined up
Me too,
nicely with
probably.
prepping for this film or for this podcast. So for me, we talked about a lot of different sense of adventures. And we've touched on some of these themes before, but I think what this movie really encapsulate well is, you can be an adventurous person in your everyday life by trying new things, talking to new people, just getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit. It does not have to be something hard. You don't have to be hanging off the side of,
Mhm.
the Burj Khalifa or be strapped to the front of a car in the middle of like an African desert getting driven around. You can do this in your everyday life. And what this movie really shows is a character who has like no sense of adventure. Like in the beginning, he's like annoyed. He has to even go to Philadelphia to cover, or sorry, Pennsylvania to cover the Groundhog Day ceremonies. He's saying, "Oh, I don't want to." He's making up excuses for not going to dinner with his colleagues. He's very dismissive of everyone who tries to even just make small talk. Like he's very insular in his own worldview, honestly. And he's not happy, not a nice person. No one likes him. It's not like he's living a great life. He's miserable because he can't kind of get out of his own box. and the time loop that he gets stuck in. I think originally just out of boredom, right? He's living the same day over and over again. So it kind of forces him to have to look, I have nothing else to do. I might as well just kind of talk, to these other people that normally I would, never want to even care to look at in the eye. He starts becoming a better person and realizing that actually is the joys in life you find just from little small things that don't have to be these big grand adventures you go on, because he doesn't ever leave this town, this day. Like, just like sometimes, I feel like I'm living the same day over and over again as well. Like, in a way, days can be monotonous and your life can feel monotonous sometimes. But again, you can get that sense of adventure just by, talking to someone on the subway or the grocery store line, or, trying a new restaurant that you never tried. Like, those can be adventurous too. Like, do you kind of get what I'm saying here a little bit?
I totally
Does that resonate?
agree. It totally resonates. And I often thought about that because, when I'm on my travels, as we talked about in the Catch Me If You Can case, I do go all out of myself to, sit at the bar by myself,
Mm-hmm.
make conversation with people. And often I've gotten invited to a party or something, by just talking to strangers. And then when I come back, and I was like, I should bring more of that attitude to my day-to-day life in the place that I live in, which is
Right.
actually quite hard to do,
It's very hard. Yeah.
one still does it, but not to that same degree. So yeah, the message of the movie really resonates that you can find joy and adventure in the littlest of things. And some of that can be personal passions, which I think, this podcast is proof of that. You and
That's
I
right.
doing this,
That's
but
right. Yeah.
I think you draw a lot more meaning when you actually engage with other people in small to meaningful ways. And yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I should have asked you at the outset, had you seen this film before? And
I
what
had
was
seen
your
it bits and
history with the
pieces,
film?
and yeah, and to be honest, like I had sort of in my mind maybe even dismissed this movie that, oh, another grumpy Bill Murray character and always the
Hmm.
same. And I'm okay on him, like
Right. I
appreciate
know you're
him
not a big
for
fan. Yeah.
everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know, watching this movie this time sort of kind of blew me away. I feel like I had a Groundhog Day moment with Bill Murray and this movie of just like living in it, and then by the end of it being really moved by it, that I think this movie is going to be in my rotation now, which is
Oh,
so strange to say that it's
hmm.
been this iconic
Yeah.
movie, for so many people. And I'm just kind of entering that zone, even though I had watched it before. So I don't know. I really enjoyed it this time.
Oh, that's cool. That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I saw this film. I remember when it came out, like in theaters, like as my
Mm,
family would go to see it. I was a huge Bill Murray fan as a kid, and still am now. But especially as a kid, he was one of my favorite, comedic actors. And I think this is almost like the perfect role for him, because
it's perfect role for him.
he is
Yeah,
so good at playing like a sarcastic, sardonic, like uncaring asshole. But underneath him, there's like some sensitive side. And it comes across in all his performances in different ways. But this movie, you really see him transform by the end.
totally.
He
It's pulled
becomes,
out.
yeah, it's full. He's like, now he is, more of like a softie, or more of a more well-rounded person. I'll say that. And I just really, really love his performance. And I think too is the way they deal with him and Andy McDowell in the film too, where, he's basically like not interested in her at all in the beginning. And then when he's stuck in the Groundhog Day situation, starts kind of feeling, oh, maybe I can kind of make her fall in love with me, basically. So he cheats at
Mm-hmm.
doing that by learning all these things about her and trying to like do all these things, but it doesn't end up working, because that's not
Mm-hmm.
how you
Mm-hmm.
get someone to fall in love with you. It has to be they love you for who you are, not because of the way you're treating them. And it's not only because when at the end he gives up on kind of trying to do that, becomes a better person, then she falls for him. I just think that is a great lesson that he learns in this film too, and is something just again as kind of ties back to another part of this film too, around like the good and bad, or not good and bad, the healthy and unhealthy forms of adventure. Like when he
Right.
starts out, he's being adventurous by stealing a car, or
Right.
robbing a bank, or trying to eat all this food, or just spending a bunch of money. Like those are forms of being adventurous, but they're very hollow, right? He's not
Exactly.
being a better person. He's not stretching himself in those things. He's giving into his like more like carnal desires, I guess.
Right.
But it's only when he puts those aside and starts like learning to play the piano and learning to help people in the town and understand who they are. That's like the healthier type of adventure, which is
Mm-hmm.
something sometimes to remind yourself of too, because it's kind of easy to get caught up in like, oh, adventure, just going out and like going crazy one night. It's like, yeah, sort of, but it's not as meaningful potentially to you growing as a person as, talking to that person in line at the grocery store and learning a little bit about them, or yeah,
Right.
going to a new restaurant. So I like that message in this film too. I just think this movie's got a lot going on, even though it's very simple and enjoyable in what it's trying to do. But I mean, you can read. I mean, there's really long like analysis of this religious allegories and life lessons, all these
Uh,
things. There's a lot of stuff going on in this film. But for me, I just always viewed it as a way to be like, yeah, I could be adventurous in my everyday life. To your point, right? It's easy to do it when you're traveling, or easier than just going to the same coffee shop every day. You can still find a little bit of adventure in that.
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the whole Andy McDowell relationship and the whole slap montage is actually really
I love
fun, but
that part.
also very meaningful. And yeah, this movie is way deeper than I thought it would be, and yeah, I couldn't agree. It's the perfect role for him. So I was very happy to rewatch it and actually really like it and love it.
Nice, nice. Glad to hear that. Great. So to get to films that did not make it, any adventure films you thought about including but just didn't fit?
Yeah, so I actually did have a water movie in Life of Pi, but I guess that sort of
Oh,
goes
yeah.
across a whole
A
bunch
lot of
of
different. Yeah, yeah,
a
great
lot of
film.
different stuff. Yeah, so that was another one, and then actually a lot of Steve Martin movies. Even
Mm.
whether it's Father of the Bride or House Sitters, that sort of is more in the vein of adventure and taking risks and chances, and growing as a person in a day-to-day life. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
weirdly I thought of Steve Martin a lot as sort of the day-to-day adventure person.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I can draw parallels a little bit to his persona, similar to like a
Bill
Bill
Murray,
Murray, where like, he also plays a really good jerk. I mean, literally, he played the jerk in the jerk, but he
literally,
he
yeah,
plays like a good jerk, but then who also it's coming from the right place. Is a lot
right.
of his persona as well. So for me, I had a lot more like classical kind of adventure movies of like Captain Blood, Foreign Correspondent, Raise the Lost Ark. A numerous amount of James Bond films I was thinking about with that globetrotting aspect as well.
True.
And Master and Commander. I guess I had a water one on there too with Russell Crowe. But I think I really love the films we talked about today. I think they all captured all these different aspects of adventure, and it's definitely a lot of good life lessons in that too. I think adventurousness is something that's important to put a little bit in your life. It just helps you as a person and helps the people around you.
Okay, so what's coming up next?
Yeah, so now that we're moved on from adventure, next episode, it's getting close to the Oscars. And last year, at
Mhm.
close to the Oscars, we picked a category we both love, film scores, and we talked about a lot of our film scores that movies that made us love film scores. So now we're picking another category, which is acting. So these are movies that shaped our admiration for film acting. So we're going to talk a lot about performance, I think, in the next episode, which will be very interesting. It'll be fun.
Very looking forward to it. Very difficult episode for me, as I might have hinted on the podcast before, that acting and the craft of acting is sort of how I fell in love with movies. So yeah, excited to talk to you about that. But with that, this is our episode. Appreciate all of your love and support so far. Please like us, subscribe to us wherever you find podcasts, and until then, we'll see you next time.
Yes, we will. See you later.